أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم أحل لكم الصيد البحر وطعامه متاعا لكم وللسيارة وحرم عليكم الصيد البر وما دمت حرما واتقوا الله الذي إليه تحشرون صدق الله العظيم. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "It is lawful for you to hunt and eat seafood as a provision for you and for travelers, but hunting on land is forbidden to you while on pilgrimage. Be mindful of Allah, to whom you all will be gathered." Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to another episode of Islam for Europeans. And I've been meaning to make this video. The topics that we talk about in this channel are often very touchy. They're very loaded at times because there is such a stigma around talking about white people, Europeans, vis-a-vis Muslims, Islam, the whole idea of European identity and how that conflicts with the type of the liberal agenda, living in a multicultural society. So these are all topics that can, easily get you to the platform unless you're very sensitive about how you talk about these things, right? And anyone can read our platform on the Islam for Europeans channel, and that what the things we're advocating for are very mainstream, and would be a win-win for both the Muslim community and the West at large. But I like talking about this topic such as this, when you talk about, the relationship between, Muslim communities in the West and non-white populations. The kind of things you can infer from these different topics can be very interesting. You just bypass all the touchiness of these subjects, and you can give an example that that we don't often think about. And the topic I want to talk about today is why there are no halal sushi / Japanese restaurants in all, not just Toronto, but all of Southwestern Ontario. So I did a little bit of research. I looked to find if there were halal sushi restaurants or halal Japanese restaurants. There were none that I could find in the entire Greater Toronto area. The only one that was something that to that effect was a kosher sushi restaurant. I'm assuming because it was in a Jewish neighborhood. But let's dig into why this is, because on the surface you would think that it would be quite easy for any sushi restaurant to go halal. Because what are we talking about here? I mean, 90% of the food in a sushi restaurant is seafood anyway. And the remaining 10% is usually chicken or beef. Most sushi restaurants don't serve pork at all. The only thing they would have to change aside from the meat would be any products that might have, possibly lard or pork products in them. And B, and I'll get into this a little bit later, alcohol. They're cooking with alcohol or having, in Ontario, it's called an LCBO license, basically a license to sell alcoholic beverages. So, when we look at other, restaurants that come from different nationalities that do have halal restaurants that you don't typically associate with, halal food. Because they don't have an existent Muslim population. You still see halal Mexican restaurants. There's one in Dearborn, at least a couple of them. There are halal Chinese restaurants, particularly Hakka Chinese. And one would think on the surface that it would be more difficult because these cuisines often serve pork more often than Japanese restaurants. So, you can speculate as to why this is. I mean, one could say, and it's a valid point, and this probably, goes into the pie chart as to why, there is no halal sushi restaurant. And that is, quite simply put, there are very few Japanese Muslims to begin with. right? So, for any existing population to have like a restaurateur, within that population is very rare. Restaurateurs are very hard to come by. It's a very risky profession. A lot of restaurants fail after the first couple of months. And when you have a population that doesn't have a lot of Muslims in it, or close to none at all, it's going to be almost impossible to find any restaurateur who knows the cuisine, to make the jump to go to halal food, right? So that's definitely one factor. Um, you can also point to the fact that Muslims, Muslim populations living in the West, um, you know, first of all, sushi isn't really that popular as opposed to, people's, native cuisines. You look at South Asian cuisine, you look at Arab cuisine. Sushi, some people like it, but it's not for all tastes. And when you're talking about, the populations that are strict about eating halal meat, i.e., the South Asian community, let's be honest, they tend to like really spicy food, and I do as well. I mean, I love hot food, but I could see why sushi, wouldn't appeal to them that much. And yeah, you have wasabi, but wasabi isn't spicy. It's just it can burn your nostrils off, right? So it's a different kind of like a challenge for your palate. Um, and even if people do want sushi, there's no really on the surface, not really much of a need, to go to a halal sushi restaurant when they're pretty ubiquitous. Like um, now people don't care about, where they get their sushi from, A, because it's mostly seafood, right? So there's no need to think, hey, is this seafood halal? I mean, all seafood is halal. You don't have to slaughter it a certain way. Um, and so that's definitely, I mean, you could pick it up at any um, department store now, like Freshco and Metro, Raba. There's always like some place where you can buy sushi. You don't have to worry about if it's halal or not, right? And that kind of begs the question: why have a halal sushi restaurant? Well, think about it. It would it's just the fact that there's nothing like this available. Like even in London here, there is no halal sushi restaurant, and there's about 30,000 Muslims in London. I mean, even the fact that you would have one sushi restaurant that has halal meat, um, it doesn't serve any pork products or alcohol, you would be the only show in town, basically. Same thing goes for Toronto. I mean, it would basically be the place to be. It would be like the like you said before many times in this channel, the integration of Japanese culture within Islam, right? But you don't see that. I mean, it seems like a no-brainer. I mean, it would almost take very little to switch, the 10% of your menu to halal chicken and halal beef. And then on top of that, the cost would be minimal. Very few products contain pork. Most sushi restaurants don't serve pork at all. So it wouldn't be that big of a jump. And once you get your halal certification, you can start advertising it everywhere. You can just start advertising at mosques and whatnot. And then all of a sudden, you have Muslims calling you for parties, Eid parties, wedding parties, get-togethers. If you were to have a theoretical restaurant like this, it would become, quite quickly, a fabric of the Muslim community. But the I think one of the biggest issues is not the fact that it would be halal meat at this restaurant per se, but the fact that a lot of Muslims will not go to um, a quote unquote halal restaurant if alcohol is also being served. It's almost like it's like an oxymoron. You can't have a halal restaurant that serves alcohol, and a few of them do exist, here or there. But like it's just a really bad business move because, as we know, Muslims will, if they're practicing, will not enter, any type of restaurant where alcohol is being served. And then we can go into the details about the ahadith that talk about this. There's very strict rulings on if you're going to especially if you're going to follow these rulings to a T, even sitting down at a table in which alcoholic drinks are being served. or just even supporting a restaurant that does serve alcohol, right? So I'm sure a lot of Muslims, who aren't practicing don't care per se. A lot of them go to Applebee's or Montana's, and alcohol is being served there, but very rarely. I think it has more to do with the fact that with non-Muslim populations, it's the exact inverse. A lot of non-Muslims, especially white people, will not go to a restaurant unless alcohol is being served, right? So it's the complete opposite. So, to ask, people who, drink alcohol to go to a restaurant where they don't serve alcohol, it's almost like they just want to get out of there as quickly as humanly possible, right? Even for Westerners who don't drink alcohol, like they're very reluctant to have a party, or they're probably never going to have any type of booking for any type of event if alcohol is not being served. So it's almost like a prerequisite to become, a successful business when you're living in a city with a lot of non-Muslims in it, right? So to make the jump from just serving alcohol to outright banning it, like on the surface, you're going to have less overhead. Alcohol is expensive to buy. All of your wait staff have to get smart serve. There's a cost of getting the license. Insurance is higher. There's a possibility that you could be sued. You have to cut people off if they don't drink so much. So, there's a lot of headaches associated with any restaurant that serves alcoholic beverages. But putting that aside, let's say you're a Japanese restaurateur or a Korean restaurateur who opens up a restaurant. You put all this money into your restaurant, and you serve alcohol, Sapporo or sake, or even Canadian liquor. And then a Muslim comes to you and says, "Hey, I got a great idea. Why don't you go halal and you'll get all the support from the Muslim community?" Well, that's an enormous risk for that person to take because, like I said before, there's almost very few Japanese or Korean Muslims. And to ask them to take on this endeavor when they've probably spent, close to $500,000, and a lot of that money comes from their family and their extended family. So their family and extended family has put all this money into it as well. To ask them not to serve alcohol, that's a huge jump. And since they don't know Muslims, and the Muslim community, by and large, doesn't not interact with Northeast Asians. As I said before, go to any of the Chinatowns in Toronto or any of the Japanese neighborhoods. I don't know if there's Japantown in Toronto, but you go to the Chinatowns in Toronto, there's not one masjid. Chinese Muslims, they're not even present there. And, Muslims by and large, you don't see a lot of them there. So they've pretty much segregated themselves. So you have two segregated non-European communities that don't really even talk to one another. And this is why, I pointed out the fact that even though there's more animosity between Hindus and Muslims in Canada, as opposed to Chinese Canadians and Muslims, because Chinese Canadians here, most of them don't support the CCP. So you would think it would be a lot easier for Chinese Canadians to convert to Islam, but that's not the case because they don't know many Muslims, and the Muslim community kind of sticks to their own, and they don't really reach out or do any type of dawah work with any of the Chinatowns in Canada. So to ask a restaurateur to stop selling alcohol and going halal, even though on this in principle it'll be very easy for any sushi restaurant to go halal, they don't want to do it because they don't really know the Muslim community. And, they're going to lose a lot of support from non-Muslims who go to their restaurant if they stop serving alcohol. Like, their business is going to go way down in terms of non-Muslim clientele. But is the Muslim community, they don't have any type of petition that they signed, it's not like, thousands of Muslims are, are going to say, yes, we're going to support this restaurant if they go halal. So what do you expect? Like, if a Japanese restaurant or sushi restaurant went halal and stopped serving alcohol, and there was an influx of Japanese or Chinese converts to Islam, then that would have a ripple effect on the whole, sinosphere in Toronto. But you don't see that. How long have Muslims been in Toronto? How long have the Chinese Canadians been in Toronto? Decades, right? But no one takes on this endeavor. So when you look at the situation as a whole, this whole Medina model, utopian idea that we're all living in a global village, and then that everyone lives in the same sphere like they did in Medina, and that the Muslim community is going to look after the needs of the convert, and that just doesn't hold water. And it's clear to see, in an example such as this, that even though it sounds like a good idea on paper, the fact that Muslims and non-Muslim Northeast Asians, i.e., Japanese, Koreans, Islam isn't really present. I mean, there's Japanese converts, there's Korean converts, but like white people who convert to Islam, they don't convert as a group. They convert to Islam as individuals, basically. Right. So, in conclusion, great idea on paper. That would be wonderful if the Muslim community would petition or get signatures down to say, look, we would support. There's no. That's another thing. There's these Islamic organizations like these think tanks. They don't even think about this stuff. They don't think, hey, you know what? Let's reach out to the Japanese community or the Korean community. Let's go to their cultural centers. Let's start a dialogue. Let's get 1,000, 2,000 signatures from the Muslim community saying, hey, let's support a Japanese halal sushi restaurant, complete with the musalla in the back. We'll support it, and you'll get a lot of clientele from us. Like there isn't even an attempt, to try something like this. And I think it just comes down to the fact that people tend to live in their own spheres, and it's going to have to take the initiative of a group of Japanese converts or Korean converts to Islam, to do something similar to what we're doing at Islam for Europeans, and take the reins themselves, because the Muslim communities, in the West, by and large, they stick to their own, and they're very friendly, and they're very glad that they took your shahada, and they're very nice, and they definitely want to help you out. But to ask them to enter into your spheres and change the whole culture there, that is an enormous task that remains to be seen. Okay, so again, you can extrapolate the fact to the fact that even in Europe proper, there are no European halal restaurants in France or in Germany or in Britain or Italy. The overwhelming majority of halal restaurants are Turkish, South Asian. There isn't really a demand on the surface, for a halal restaurant that serves, the food of native Europeans, which I'm assuming would gain a lot of support. I mean, like, and to change the whole culture and say, look, Islam is for everybody. This would be a wonderful idea. I think that a restaurant as a first brick and mortar organization for something like an organization such as ours, like for example, if Islam for Japanese opened up, I would recommend that don't open up a brick and mortar office with a musalla. Open up a restaurant, because it's a sustainable business. You can have your meetings there. It's the lifeblood of the community. You can have a prayer room in the back, and your relatives and your greater community would feel more comfortable going there. Yeah, I mean, it would be a great idea to take on something like this. I think that we have many existent Islamic organizations that have good amounts of funding, and they wouldn't really be losing any money, really. I mean, they wouldn't be throwing money down the drain because it would be a sustainable business. So, in conclusion, I do think it's a great idea, but at the same time, because people tend to live in their own spheres by and large in the West, that is why a halal Japanese sushi restaurant remains to be seen. Okay, so that's my time for today. Doro arigato. Assalamu alaikum from Islam for Europeans. Please like and subscribe. Just some housekeeping issues. Inshallah, I will be having an interview with Brother Jordan M. Inshallah, on Sunday at 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, 11 a.m. UK time. So please stay tuned for that. It'll be on his channel, Jordan M. Please subscribe to his channel as well. He does some great dawah stuff as well. But that's my time for the day. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. And sayonara.